Hello, everyone, and welcome to Highland Copper's live event hosted by Sixt. I'm pleased to introduce their speakers for today, Barry O'Shea, interim CEO, and Mike Foley, site manager at Highland Copper. They'll walk us through a presentation, and after that, we will be accepting questions. So as a reminder, you can submit your questions in the chat at any point during the presentation. You'll find the little chat box on the bottom right corner of your screen. As always, the summit is being recorded and will be available to watch in the coming days, most likely today. So stay tuned for that. Without further ado, though, I'll hand things over to Barry to kick things off.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate you running the seminar. It's a pleasure to be here. As Kyle mentioned, my name is Barry O'Shea. I've been with Highland for the last year and a half as the CFO, and I'm very pleased to step into the interim CEO role and look forward to moving us forward on the projects. While I do come from the finance area, I just assure you that I have plenty of time on the ground and specifically on large construction projects from a mining perspective. So we're really getting ourselves ready in the next period to both finance and step into construction. I am based in Toronto, naturally with access to the capital markets here in Canada. But most importantly, we are an American company with key American presence, and the people that we employ are on the ground and the ones that really help us build our overall license to operate. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Mike Foley. And Mike, maybe you can give yourself a little background and introduction.
Barry, thank you very much. Mike Foley, site manager with Highland Copper, and been here for a couple of months now. And thank you for this opportunity. Lifelong resident of the area, Wegibbet County. In fact, I live in one of the townships, one of the two townships where the project is located. Graduated locally from the Ironwood Area High School and obtained a degree in civil engineering way too many years ago from Michigan Technological University in Houghton. Through the years, worked at a number of opportunities in the consulting engineering world, the contracting world, the municipal world, and most recently the mining world before this endeavor. I bring 30 plus years of experience to the project, and I look forward to the opportunities in front of us. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, Mike, and it's been great to have you on the ground, obviously. And so with that, we'd like to give you a project update. I think a lot has happened over 2023. For those who don't know Highland, we are one of very few fully permitted copper projects in the United States. Recent studies complete and really looking to move forward into the construction and production phase. And, to make that step, I think there are some key building blocks that you need to have in place. And location, of course, is critical. We're very pleased to be in the US and more specifically in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, an area that we're welcome. The US, of course, is a focus on domestic copper supply, and we're looking to feed into that and be a key player there. In mining, and specifically junior mining, permits are critical, and you can't always count on having them. We do. The Copperwood project is fully permitted. It's a process that we've run through with Michigan State in a very efficient way as we operate on private land in Michigan. And our second project, White Pine, is advancing through the permitting phase at this point, and we certainly look at that optimistically. Scale of resource is also important. Both of our projects are multi-billion-pound resources. Copperwood specifically, our 100% owned project, and I'll show you shortly, is about 3.5 billion pounds of copper. White Pine is larger again, and I'll acknowledge we're a joint venture partner there along with Kinterra, and we've been very pleased so far with how they've been moving that asset forward. So overall, it gives rise to long-lived assets, certainly 10 to 15 years at Copperwood plus, and arguably 20 plus at White Pine. And we're well funded. Again, something you can't take for granted in these capital markets. But I'll walk you through the joint venture at a point that we did that really provided us access to capital at both Copperwood and White Pine. So this is the broad overview, and I'm going to step into a few of these in a little more detail, but it begins to give you a sense of how the building blocks are in place as we think about moving forward into construction and production, obviously the natural step that junior miners want to make. So let's start with location. We're on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It has a rich mining history. Mike can certainly allude to that. He's been in the area for his whole life. I certainly can't speak for the state, but what we have seen from public record is that the state supports projects that bring jobs into Michigan, as well projects that are looking to operate responsibly and support electrification. As we look at those criteria, we certainly think we fit, and will naturally progress along a process there. We operate on private land. That's very valuable. You're not needing to run through the overall federal process. And certainly we've seen, and I can speak to how we've operated with the key authorities within Michigan. They are there to make sure that you follow your obligations, that you perform well, that you take your environmental responsibilities very seriously. But assuming you do all of those things, they're not there to trip you up. They're there to be good partners, and we've certainly benefited from that. And then looking at the balance, obviously, this is a local community that's had mining historically and is supportive. I think Mike will speak to that shortly. Obviously, Detroit is in southern Michigan, considerable access to deliver arguably into industry in Michigan, and really, generally speaking, a great place to be. I do think that, when people look at mining in the US, obviously they think directly of states like Arizona and Nevada. I think Michigan will continue to distinguish itself over time. I talked about resource scale. Critical again, 3.7 billion pounds at Copperwood, 5.5 billion pounds at White Pine, and acknowledging that is the 100% stake. That being said, our 34% interest is very significant, even on that basis. Focusing maybe on Copperwood, I point out that we currently have an 11-year mine life. That's at a feasibility study level. So if you look at that pie graph, when you issue a feasibility study, you use the measured and indicated, or the M&I, which is the right-hand side of that pie graph. So what it tells you is that when we think about our mine life, it's 11 years at the outset. It's really only using a portion of the defined resource. What you can't use in that feasibility, but you can as you further infill and define it, is the inferred tonnage. And you can see we have a considerable inferred tonnage that we'll look to convert over time. So there's good reason to believe that this is certainly a 15-year plus mine life, and that will be a goal of ours as we progress. Permitting, I can't understate the value. If you don't have permits, you simply can't operate, you can't have access to the upside, to the cash flow, and of course to supplying the domestic copper into the US, which is of course needed. This just gives you a sense of all key state permits that we have received, and that we make sure we keep in good standing. Mike will walk through it again shortly, but there are a range of obligations that we've seen, certainly at Copperwood as we've initiated some site work through 2023. Yes, they are obligations, but we don't quite see them that way. They're aligned to our principles. We want to operate well, safely, and positively from an environmental perspective in Michigan, and we will continue to do so. And in doing that, again, it provides you your license to operate, not just from a state perspective, but from within the community itself. I won't speak too much to White Pine. Kinterra, as the operator, are now progressing baselining and permitting on that side. We certainly think, past success is the best indicator of future success. Having permitted Copperwood recently, we certainly think Kinterra and we as a joint venture partners can look optimistically at that process for White Pine. And so acknowledging those building blocks are in place, a key thing is having the capital to continue to move both assets forward. And that really was provided the rationale for the transaction that we did with Kinterra. We love the White Pine North asset. That being said, it's a large asset and it's a little longer dated. So we really wanted to bring in a partner, both from a technical and capital perspective, to help us move that forward. And that's what this transaction did. We sold 66% of White Pine for $30 million US. That 30 million is not ring fenced in any manner, so it's going directly to Copperwood, and you'll see that we put that money to work through 2023 and ensure that we're staying in line with our permit obligations. Additionally, as part of that transaction, a second 30 million commitment has been made by the joint venture partners, so both us and Kinterra, to progress White Pine forward through environmental baselining, permitting, infill drilling, and on to further studies. We're naturally responsible for 34% of that joint venture 30 million commitment. Fortunately, Kinterra have also provided us access to a 10 million unsecured loan should we choose to take that for the purposes of moving the projects forward. But generally what you can see is we've created about 60 million of liquidity, 30 into Copperwood, 30 into White Pine to keep pushing these assets forward and keep ourselves on a path to production and development. And I'm going to show you now, this is what the company looks like it's in its entirety. And bearing in mind that, you know, our market cap today is relatively modest, probably not dissimilar to a lot of other junior developers in the market, but there's a lot of value here. 100% of Copperwood per our feasibility study, and that's at the $4 copper price, is about 170 million. The project is, of course, highly sensitive to copper price at 450. The NPV or net asset value moves to 333 million. On the White Pine side, you know, and I think it's really important that you see the value that is still there. While we don't have operatorship, we're going to benefit from Kinterra moving this project forward. Our 34% stake alone is worth $279 million on a net asset value basis at $4 copper. And again, you can see that scaling up at higher copper prices across both assets. And I'm showing these at 100% Copperwood and 34% White Pine. Substantial resource, considerable life of mine, long-lived, you know, mid to high-level production ranges with strong IRRs. And I think as you look at the bottom of this slide, I think it's really important to understand that we, as a relatively small junior miner, our team, of course, we think is strong, but it's a small team. That team is now fully focused on Copperwood, whereas our 34% stake in White Pine is really handed over to Kinterra as the operator to help us bring that forward. And they bring, and we have seen it to date, we're only 2 to 3 months into the joint venture arrangement with them, but they bring a considerable amount of energy, enthusiasm, technical services, and of course, capital. So broadly, we have a means of, from a capital and management perspective, moving both assets forward. Over 30 million in the bank, 30 million additionally committed to White Pine, and importantly, no debt on the company. So when you look at that, you begin to get a sense of how we can move both of these assets forward. Again, critical for any junior to have a plan how to keep moving. So that gives you a high-level view of the company, and I wanted to step back into the assets now. And in a moment, I'm certainly going to give Mike a chance to show some of the work that we did at site this summer that we're really happy about. Before I do that, I guess I just wanted to show you one thing, and maybe it's to help you understand why Copperwood is so important, both to domestic supply in the US, but important to our value as a company. I'm showing a graph here, which is the S&P view of supply and demand of copper in the coming period. Naturally, I mean, if you look, and this is specific to the US only, there's a deficit to start, and as we step towards increased electrification, that supply-demand differential only increases. And I'm showing here the potential for us to be stepping into production, particularly as that supply-demand imbalance peaks. So it's kind of a right place at the right time for Copperwood, and we certainly look forward to supplying into the US domestic need for copper. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Mike. He's got a few things he wants to show you and walk you through how we think about our license to operate and community relations. So Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Barry. So first of all, if you note the picture here that we have, this is taken in the very southeast corner of the project. This is a diversion channel / mitigation channel that we've constructed here in our early works in the summer of 2023 to divert the water around our future tailings disposal facility. You'll notice there to the right side of the screen where you can see some of the back and forth or sinuosity of the newly constructed streams. And the pockets of water represent some of the mitigation wetlands that we're constructing as part of this project. And of course, all this work was completed in order to meet those permit obligations. We did so very proudly with no lost time incidents and zero reportable environmental instances. The work was completed on time and on budget. And so we like to take this opportunity in front of this vast audience to thank some of those folks that helped us working on this in the consulting engineering realm. We had help from Bar Engineering based out of Minneapolis, grounded, if you will, in the upper Midwest, but offices throughout the country in Canada, US and Canada, and about 1,000 employees helped us design these diversions. Additionally, we had assistance from FOTH, based out of Green Bay, again, offices throughout the US, about a 650 person firm. They did some great work for us. And then in a little bit more local level, we had some assistance and continue with all these engineers' assistance in the future of Coleman Engineering, a relatively smaller firm, about 100 people based in the Iron Mountain area with a very local office in Ironwood, practically adjacent to the project. On the contracting side of things, we did receive quite a bit of the work was completed by an Upper Peninsula-based contractor, MJ Van Dam, from the Gwin area. They have a wide variety of services that they perform, but they are the main contractor. But on a little more local level, we obtained assistance from Silver Creek Contracting, based just a few miles down the road from the project. And kudos to all those people. Not to underplay the local employees that helped us, that are actually work for Highland Copper and assisted in all of these efforts. So again, thank you very much for taking a few minutes here that we can thank those folks for all the great work that they did. The impacted activities that we completed this year in accordance with the Part 301 and the Part 303 permit were to impact the wetlands and to impact the streams. So with that, Barry, maybe we could go to the next slide, please. And so impacts to the wetlands, we're required to turn the wetlands into uplands. And as you can see by the picture on the right, we took the opportunity to use an upland style seed and make that conversion this summer. All of those aspects of that conversion were completed. The stream diversions were also completed, as you saw on the previous slide, through the mitigation / diversion construction of those channels. On the mitigation, which of course is a very important step in this whole thing, that we need to make sure that we go good for any of these impacts that we have completed or performed. We have worked on a couple of aspects of the wetland mitigation. First, the mitigation package on wetlands is divided into two parts. The first being construction of new wetlands. As you can see, the picture here on the left is an area of many acres where we're going to construct some new wetlands. And as I said previously, wetlands also appear in those stream diversions. The second aspect of that wetland mitigation package is in cooperation with Gogebic County. We have preserved many hundreds of acres of wetlands not too far away from the project into perpetuity, so that we are certain, and the state is certain, that those wetlands remain intact for forever. On the stream mitigation, as we showed, we're building the diversions around the edges of it, but we also have several other mitigation activities that we have started, as we stated, and we're working on to get completed. There are some on-site but out of the project area creek crossings that are, as is kind of typical in the UP, perhaps undersized. And so part of our mitigation is to bring them up to the bank full width of the existing streams for better passage of fish and other animals through that stream corridor. There was this project actually started with a test mine shaft back in the 50s, and that rock excavated out of that mine shaft was used in various areas around in order to put in road crossings and the like. And so our obligations under the mitigation packages to pick all that up and make sure that it ends up in our tailings disposal facility. And then the biggest, well, aside from the diversions, one of the biggest stream mitigation packages, in cooperation with the Ontonagon County Road Commission, we are working to replace 5, let's just say, grossly undersized culverts of a crossing in southern Ontonagon County, and replacing it with a 50-foot wide concrete arch pipe that will provide for excellent fish and other animal passage in that area that was previously encumbered by those grossly undersized culverts. So moving on, one of the things, obviously, as the local representation at Highland Copper is building that local license to operate. And Highland Copper has had this for over a decade, dating back to the Orvana days. But we want to make sure that we continue to work on that and provide those relationships. So of recently, here in the past, we have obtained resolutions of support from an overwhelming amount of the communities in the area, and we are continuing to work with them. Gogebic County is done very well for us in that aspect, and we look forward to completing a few more. Ontonagon County has provided us with a number of those resolution support from the county and other municipal levels. We appreciate that very much. And in fact, Houghton County is supporting the project as well through resolutions of support. So thank you very much to all those entities for the help that you've provided. And we continue to work, obviously, as best we can with local sources, local employment, et cetera, as we understand that very much becomes part of that license to operate. As we can see kind of in the middle of the slide, we work regularly and diligently with the state authorities, Michigan Eagle, Environment, Great Lakes Energy Department. There's various departments within Eagle that we work with on multitude of matters revolving around these permits, and we have regular and frequent conversations with them to make sure that we are maintaining compliance and providing any information that they may need. Also, at the state level, working with the Department of Natural Resources as needed, and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So we look forward to continued efforts with that and maintain those relationships so that we can make sure we're in full compliance. On the employment and development partners, we have been working very diligently with a number of local agencies. One of the bigger ones, Invest UP and Michigan Works, for their assistance in some of the possible employment aspects that we are pursuing. But also we've had very good support from the local community college, Michigan Technological University, Northern Michigan University, and Bay College. And we look forward to working and partnering with those entities to make sure that we can provide professional, technical, and hands-on personnel to staff the project and move it through operations. On a local level, on a soon level, if you will, we are advancing the employment of 3 positions here based out of the Wakefield office in the next 6 months. So anyone out there that is looking for a job in the environmental, civil, or administrative aspects, why, get a hold of us. Take a look on our website, please.
Thank you, Mike. That's some great background, and I certainly want to reiterate our commitment to building the appropriate, license to operate through ongoing communication. It's great for us, obviously, to have Mike on the ground. He's local, he knows the people, and he's very happy to be involved and communicate all things across our project. And I think you'll have seen through some of the pictures at site, we take our concurrent mitigation obligations very seriously. And I'd also note that before we even began any work this summer, it was a requirement to place a financial assurance or a bond with the state. So approximately $8 million is already placed with the state should there be any issues that the state wants to look at. So, we, as I say, see this as a matter of principle, and naturally, of course, also have the obligation from a permit perspective. But we look forward to continuing to build relationships. As I say, I'm new into the role, but look forward to continue to build the relationships across these stakeholder groups. So with that, I want to look at one more slide related to Copperwood. So you've seen some of the building blocks, but I really want you to understand the value that's there as well. And on the bottom of this slide, you can see, and this leverage to copper price is critical and important. We did our study, and you can see I've got it boxed here at $4. It's 168 million NPV with about an 18% IRR. So really nice, robust returns at $4 copper, but you can begin to see how that valuation scales as we step up. That being said, it's never a plan to rely on copper price movements. We have a whole host of internal projects that we're working on, things that were identified during the feasibility study that weren't fully run down, that we're now looking at to see if we can make the base project, irrespective of copper price changes, stronger and stronger. I referenced government grants at both the state and the federal level. At a federal basis, likely you'll have heard that copper went onto the critical metals list in the US, and that has arguably opened us up to a whole host of different types of federal funding, and that's certainly something we're chasing down. In addition to looking at manners at which we can potentially restructure some of the royalties we have on the project. So those are some of the more financial pieces, but I'm going to ask Mike again just to touch briefly on some of the technical areas, and I think at the top of our list there, you'll see we have bulk ore sorting technology, which is not incorporated into our feasibility study, but we think has significant capacity to increase the economics of the project. So Mike, maybe you can touch on a few of those other technical items.
Well, great. Yes, sir, Barry. On the bulk ore sorting technology, we have provided samples to the appropriate potential manufacturers of this equipment in a small scale and received promising results that makes us feel that this technology is worth pursuing as we are intending. So what we're working to do is to collect several hundred kilograms of sample in order to send that to that manufacturer, provide a more comprehensive testing program that would in turn allow us to start to make some assumptions in some of our models, et cetera, and how this could optimize the project. And if I could maybe just take a second and explain the ore sorting technology, is that it's based upon visual and density requirements or measurements of the ore, and it allows it to take some of the lithologies that do not contain copper and reject them. This would be set up underground so that we would not have to bring as much ore up to the surface and process. It probably wouldn't change the overall tonnage per day by the mining folks underground, but it certainly has the opportunity to reduce the amount of ore that you need to bring to the surface and process. So obviously, additional aspects that provide some optimizations by bringing less tonnage up. Of course, you use less power and capital in order to build that equipment to bring it up and move it up. And you also turn around and you might be able to, if successful, build a slightly smaller plant. And as such, that would reduce some of the capital expenditures from internal equipment, as well as potentially the overall footprint of the processing facility could be made smaller with this technology. With that, of course, you on the operational side of things, you would have you certainly have some less power and reagent usage that would then, on the very tail end of things, because you're bringing less barren rock up, it has the potential to also reduce the size of your tailings management facility. So we're certainly not positive in any of this, but it's certainly, like I said, one of the forefront of the value creation that we're looking at. After that, we are looking at, like Barry said, some conversion of those tons in life of mine additions. those projects we're certainly in the planning stage, and when appropriate and when timely, we would advance some of the work it takes predominantly via drilling to convert those tons from one category to the other. On the metallurgical recovery improvements and reagent consumption, we're working with several entities to make sure that we balance the amount of reagent used, the grind size, and the recoveries. And so kind of in broad strokes, if you will, making sure that we're not over grinding it because that has a cost in power, or providing too much reagent or in excess of reagent when it doesn't really justify the additional recoveries from those reagents. So I guess in a nutshell, Barry, there's some of the technical value creation items we're working on.
That's great, Mike. I appreciate that. And I hope investors and stakeholders will see that across these projects, we have capacity to just continue to improve the value of Copperwood and as a result, improve the likelihood of a successful project financing. And so we've obviously spent a fair bit of time on Copperwood, and that's a reflection of the fact that we are the owners and operators of that. White Pine, I'm just showing you a study that we put out earlier this year. It helps you understand also why it's so valuable to us, obviously, an $821 million after-tax NPV and about a 21% IRR with a long 22-year life of mine. Naturally, that includes all measured, indicated, and inferred at a PEA level. But it's a very strong project that Kinterra are now running with and moving forward. So just to give you a sense of what's happening there, Kinterra and the joint venture partnership have hired a project director. We can see ongoing community engagement in a similar manner that we're taking care of on the Copperwood side. And really, we see them stepping in a similar way to the PEA to understand where they can further create value through ongoing study. Naturally, they'll look at ongoing drilling to look at both geotech and met side. They're looking at stepping, or continuing, I should say, on environmental baselining and stepping into the permitting process and progressing towards a study. So as I say, while we have to spend less time on it, the value of White Pine is still critical to us. We've been very pleased to see just how fully engaged Kinterra is putting capital and technical resources into White Pine, and we're really feeling kind of the weight of their organization pushing that forward as we simultaneously move Copperwood forward. And in terms of other key partners, naturally our shareholders, and a host of these shareholders have been invested for a number of years and have continued to show support through those years. Certainly, I think they'll be happy, as long with a range of other stakeholders, to see us breaking ground in 2023. I'm acknowledging that's not necessarily a construction decision, but really putting work into the ground, obviously putting some money into the local community and showing some progress, not to mention putting some of the capital behind us. So we'll continue to look forward to working with those shareholders to move the project forward. Importantly, and I see I only have it in relatively small footnote on the right, but it is a key aspect of the company. We have no warrants or no debts, and I think any stakeholder investor will know you can't step into a financing process if you're already shouldering significant debt or there's considerable overhang from a warrant perspective. So our balance sheet is in a very strong position, as it needs to be. And as we continue to improve the economics and ideally get the tailwind of ongoing copper price strength, we think we're in a very good position to finance the project in 2024. So just a couple of slides to wrap it up, and then Mike and I are more than happy to take some questions. We're obviously coming close to the end of 2023. We're pretty proud of what we've achieved. We've updated the technical studies for both projects, demonstrating we have robust projects. I think importantly, the Copperwood feasibility study incorporated a revised water source for processing, critically ensuring that all of our permits from a state perspective were sufficient to move into site construction, development, and production. We completed the JV transaction with Kinterra. providing pretty significant funding to keep moving forward on both assets. And I'd mentioned, of course, it's pretty challenging times from a capital markets perspective. So access to capital is tough. So it's nice to have done that deal and allowed us really to have cash to keep moving forward proactively. Some of that money, of course, has gone towards completing the required site work we had at Copperwood and maintaining our permits. But not only doing that work, it really allowed us to step into the region. Mike mentioned a range of the contractors that performed wonderfully for us, performing safely, on time, on budget. It was no small feat in a relatively short construction window through the summer, so we're very pleased with that. And as we walk you through, we've really now also stepped into these value creation initiatives. We want to, and it's always our job to make this project better. So closing out on some catalysts, and across the company here, of course, at Copperwood, we'll continue some early site work and spending some of the initial capital into 2024. We're really pushing hard on these value creation initiatives, and it's great to have Mike and our technical team, really running those down. And then, assuming we're in the right direction, we're stepping into project funding and construction in 2024. At White Pine, again, this is Kinterra's to manage going forward. We obviously put out the PEA in July 2023. Kinterra now stepping into environmental baselining, permitting applications, and considering their own value creation initiatives, not to mention drill programs. So I think a whole host of activities across the two projects. And then importantly, at a corporate level, operating in the US and having access potentially to both federal and state funding, I think is key. If any entity is good enough to provide financial support, it's not only financial support, it's also an endorsement for the project, and would be a great first piece of capital as we think about building out the overall project finance. I've mentioned as well, there's potential for industry partnerships in Michigan. We know that's the case. We've seen other companies successfully interact and build out that value chain along certainly with auto manufacturers, but also other industry. And importantly to us, we're going to define fully, as we think about stepping into construction, our full ESG strategy. So we're held to account as we intend to be. So with that, I certainly hope it's provided the full group a comprehensive update of what's happening at both projects, and certainly why we think our prospects are strong going into 2024. I'll take this down now, and by all means, happy to take any questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Barry. Yeah, you can come and join us here again. We did have some pre-submitted questions via email. I do encourage you guys, if you did come in late, to submit questions in the chat. They are piling up there, but there were some via email I'll get to first. The first one is addressed to Mike, actually. Mike, if you could elaborate on your past successes and who is on the Highland Copper team that can help bring this project into production successfully. Oh, and you're on mute, sorry.
Thank you very much for the question. I have past successes from various previous employment, taking projects from several $1,000s through tens of millions of dollars through design and construction in the UP for various contracting, municipal, and consulting engineering firms. And with that, we currently have a great technical team through our geologists and our engineers that we have on staff that will help us to move the project forward through design and construction. And as noted, we are working on expanding that team and adding various needed technical prowess in order to accomplish that.
And naturally, I'd add to that, as we step into project financing, that's what allows, our kind of lean team at the moment to be built out more fully and comprehensively, bring all the people in that we need to kind of move the project forward.
Thank you, Barry and Mike. Another question, I'm going to try and tie it in with an audience question as well. You're allowed to initiate pre-construction activities, but what is further required before you can initiate construction? And is there any local opposition? And I'll just add on to Graham's comment here. Does fully permitted mean fully permitted?
So to be clear, we have all the permits that we need to fully initiate construction. That's a matter of getting the appropriate funding to do so. We did start these early site works in part because we had time obligations for our permits to complete some of the impacts and of course start a range of the environmental mitigation. So that was the catalyst for us getting started work on the ground. But it should be taken as a reflection that we're allowed to be in Michigan. Our permits allow us to build on site, and as and when we're ready, we will do so. When I think about the local area, and as I mentioned, it's a historic mining district. There is considerable support across all townships, counties, municipalities, you name it. That being said, we're a mining business. There is always elements or pockets of opposition, and we take them seriously and listen as needed.
Thank you. We do have an email question that's also similar to one in the audience. So your overall thoughts on the copper market, your pre-feasibility study factored in a low copper assumption, but it's actually similar to, actually the copper price might even be lower than the lowest assumption in the pre-fees. In regards to that, adding on to Daniel's comment here, is there considerations of another partner for lower cost of capital, bigger balance sheet?
So yeah, I'm going to deal with the copper market to begin with, and it's been interesting. I think if you look at across a range of commentators, certainly when you look at the economists from the large banks, there's broadly consensus that through the mid and long term, copper is going up, and that's a function of global geopolitics, global supply demand. I obviously showed a US specific supply demand chart, but that chart is similar from one country to the next globally. And in the US, thinking about it, obviously, the US doesn't want it to leave it to chance for any critical metal. So they're looking at ways to develop critical supply domestically in the US. So we feel very strongly that the copper price will move as the fundamentals are showing, that supply demand imbalance will come to bear and copper price will increase. Like we said, though, it's not solely our plan to wait for that. We think we have a whole host of optimizations that we can work on to make the project strong at today's copper price, and certainly at $4 copper. So those are the things that we're continuing to move. In terms of building the capital to build the project, listen, investors can come from a whole host of areas. We have, as you'll see in our shareholder register, some very key and strong private equities who we think will support when we have the economics in the right place for a construction decision. Naturally, if there are other investors, certainly we would consider that and remain open.
Thank you. And this question, I'm going to read it verbatim because there was 2 likes on it, and I'm sorry if it's going to be a little bit of a repeat, but similar inquiry to above, does Copperwood hold strategic value to any major and accordingly potentially able to command a premium private owner value, in brackets, possible synergy for the owner of Eagle Mine?
So, yes, I mean, what I would say is Copperwood and certainly our stake in White Pine hold considerable value to any investor and certainly strategics. I think I mentioned there are very few fully permitted copper mines in the US. When you think about what, be it corporate strategics or just broadly investors value, they value location. So being in the US, I'd say specifically in Michigan, is increasingly important. They value permits. When an investor thinks about investing in something, there's something of a binary decision that they need to make is, can the mine actually be built? We're permitted to build, so we believe that's the case. And then when you add on to that, the fact that the economics are strong to begin with, but there's considerable upside from a life of mine extension, grants that may be available in the US, and certainly a range of the technical optimizations. There's no question that this is a valuable asset. What's interesting is, globally there's been some uncertainty worldwide, and it's holding copper back a little bit. I'd say, despite the fact that there's optimism, certainly, and not just in the long term, but in the midterm, that copper will continue to move. And when that happens, I think certainly the value will be even more so clear as investors look around to say, okay, what mines can now be built. We will stand out as one of the top candidates.
Thank you. An individual going by ES has a two-part question, and you just mentioned funding as being a attractor to the project, so I think this is fitting to address right now. First of all, maybe explain what the big three are for people like me that aren't familiar with that name, but the question is, what does it take for Highland to get the big three's attention to strike an offtake deal?
So that's the likes of GM and Ford and broadly the auto industry that is heavily located in Michigan. I think if you've been following the news, you'll have seen GM, I think in particular, invest in mining companies. They're looking at ways to secure offtake of a broad set of critical minerals. I've seen not just the auto manufacturers, but auto manufacturers look at that downstream supply with respect to lithium and nickel. And I think as copper continues to be more and more in demand, and I should say imbalanced from a supply-demand perspective, we think we'll continue to attract those discussions. Those can naturally be in the form of offtake, where you're securing your supply locally, but they can also be in the form of investments. Again, I can't speak to the fact that will certainly happen, but there's certainly conversations that we're going to continue to have.
His second question is in regards to taxes here. Now that copper is being designated as a critical mineral in the U.S., how does tax deductibility impact the overall IRR?
Yeah, so that is another area that we're looking at the moment. There are tax deductions with respect to the capital. Now, this is, I'd say, as yet unconfirmed from a copper perspective, but we're running down what that is, both from a funding perspective and a tax perspective. We do think there's going to be some significant benefits, and those as well will also boost the overall economics of both projects.
Thank you. Adrian has a direct question here in regards to silver content. Is it at commercial levels? And if so, how do you plan to monetize it?
There's only a small amount of silver. I think less than 1% of the overall revenue is in silver. I would say that there's a silver stream broadly on that. It's not a massive hit to the economics of the project, and they're built into the feasibility study. So that's how silver is being taken care of.
And where will the smelting take place?
Yeah. Mike, did you want to speak to that in terms of where the smelting would take place, where the concentrate moves to according to the feasibility study?
Absolutely, Barry. So the concentrate would produced at the Copperwood project would be taken out by truck to a rail facility. And as such, it would head to a smelter of not quite a known origin yet. It's fairly likely that it could end up in Canada, but a smelter in the Orient or Europe is not out of the question. So we don't have any agreements in place, and we're certainly exploring the most economic and viable alternatives in that matter.
And we're also, I would say, some early test work to see if the ore is amenable to concentrate leaching at site. And that would allow us then to supply copper cathode directly into Michigan, acknowledging there's considerable industry to supply it to. I'd say that is a bit of a long-dated project that we're looking at, but certainly a significant one as well.
And I don't know if this is asking the same thing or not here, but Kurt's asking, what is the strategy for the concentrator considering existing infrastructure at White Pine?
Yeah, I mean, I won't speak too much to that naturally. We're not the full operator of White Pine, But I can tell you that the PEA at the moment assumes that a full new set of infrastructure would be built. If Kinterra determine that it's appropriate to look at some of the equipment that is already at site, and if it can be usable, arguably that brings some upside. But as of right now, that PEA assumes that all infrastructure, processing infrastructure, will be built new.
An individual with the acronyms MS is looking for clarification here. The Copperwood license will run out in 5 years approximately, and there is no renewal option. Is that correct? And what are the risks there?
I don't think that's out and out correct. There are ongoing obligations that we have to make sure that we continue to renew permits. That's been the case for the past number of years, and will continue to be the case. The state permits that we have are in good standing, and yes, naturally, as with any mine, they need to be renewed on a somewhat ongoing basis. We have a strong relationship with the state, and we'll continue to renew those.
The last question, it looks like in the chat here by Shay, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Elaborating on slide 18 in brackets, potential state and federal funding. Presuming Highland has already applied for this funding, is there a timeline when the associated state/federal agencies announce funding decisions?
No, there's no timeline, and I certainly can't speak to specifics there. I've mentioned, broadly speaking, at both levels, there is funding available. I think the public record shows that that funding has been put into good projects, ones that are bringing jobs, and certainly ones where the company is showing that they're going to be a good, environmentally strong player. So, we'll continue to work those channels, but certainly there's nothing to report.
Great. Oh, one more notification here. Let me check. There's another question. I think MS is probably referring to several of your lease. I don't know if you're reading this chat here or there, Barry, but Daniel is piping up. I think MS is probably referring to several of your leases running out in 2028, unless the mine is in production. Is that correct?
I think no. I think, as I mentioned, we have ongoing obligations to continue to renew permits, and we'll continue to do so.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone that attended and submitted questions. There was quite a few questions, so that's great to see. But I will leave it to you two to close things off for us if you have any closing remarks.
Yeah, no, other than to say that we're excited at our prospects going into 2023. I certainly hope it's come across that we don't take for granted our license to operate in Michigan and in the US. And hence we're building out, ongoing discussion, ongoing communication to make sure all stakeholders are aware of what we're doing. Certainly that we're complying with all of our obligations, but more so that we're operating in a sustainable manner. And with that, we think we have in Copperwood a very strong permitted project that we think will supply into domestic supply that is needed in the US. Mining is important, and the supply of copper is important to fuel the energy transition, not just in electric vehicles, but in alternate sources of power as well. So there's certainly an environmentally friendly element to the metal that we're mining. We look forward to moving things forward, stepping into 2024 with a strong balance sheet and good assets.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Barry. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you for all that attended. If you did come in a little late, this is being recorded, so it will be on YouTube probably within the day, if not, most certainly tomorrow. But thank you, gentlemen.